Hello everybody and welcome back to Certified Collectibles. Today I want to have a brief discussion with you guys about the current state of the modern graded comic book market. More specifically, I guess the ultra-modern books published in the last 10 to 15 years. I think that's more of a realistic representation of modern comics. I know CGC says the modern age of comics started back in 1990 up to present day. That's 35 years worth of books. I don't think 35 years worth of books can be considered modern. So for our purposes today, in today's video, we're going to focus on books, let's say starting from 2012 up to present day. So maybe the last 10 to 12, 13 years worth of books. So in order to actually have this discussion, we got to go back a little bit, back to maybe 2016, 17, 18. I think that's kind of when the more modern age of comic book collecting really got kicked off in full speed, with the MCU, with the Infinity Saga, with all those Marvel movies. Now, for you guys that actually lived through that era, the Infinity Saga of the MCU, starting with Iron Man back in 2008, up to, I think, Endgame was 2019. So that 10-11 period of movies, that did more for the comic book industry than anything leading up to it. That's kind of the golden age of modern comic collecting, let's say. Marvel was just pushing these movies out. Everyone loved them. Everybody's waiting for the next movie. The lines to the cinema were down the street. If you didn't get a ticket for the movie months in advance, always sold out. You had to wait, 3, 4, 5 weeks to get in to see the movie. They played in the theaters for months. Everybody loved those movies. If you went to the Comic-Cons during that period of time, the Comic-Cons sold out instantly. I mean, to get tickets for one of those things during that big MCU Infinity Saga era, to get tickets to a Comic-Con was almost impossible. And if you did, you had to wait, for days to get into those convention centers, into those halls to actually see the stars, actually discuss those movies. So during that period of time, the Infinity Saga MCU period of time, it just drove so much interest into superheroes, into superhero collecting and comic book collecting in general. If you guys look at the key comics from the Silver Age and Golden Age and some of the Bronze Age, those books just skyrocketed in price during that period of time. But, it did a lot for the modern age of comic book collecting as well. You had a lot of people get introduced to superheroes and comic book collecting during that period of time, and it did a lot for the industry. And during that period of time, during the Infinity Saga MCU period of time, let's say 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, during that era, it seemed pretty organic. Prices moved pretty steadily upward. And, like I said, the interest, the attention was so high for Marvel superheroes, for, collecting comic books, that everything seemed pretty organic. All the way up through 2019, that's kind of when we got hit with the COVID era lockdown. The COVID era lockdown kind of created a black swan event in the collectibles world, overall, in general. All collectibles skyrocketed during the COVID era lockdowns. I mean, people were locked in their homes. There was a moratorium on paying rent and mortgage. Borrowing costs were super cheap. You could leverage up on your credit cards, and it really didn't cost you all that much. You were getting all these PPP loans, loan forgiveness, and you weren't able to spend your money on anything because you're locked at home. So because of this, a lot of people were spending this money, leveraging up, buying collectibles, flipping them online, making money. Everybody's having a good time doing it. It drove prices way up on all collectibles across the board. I think probably the most affected during that period of time was the graded VHS and the graded video game market. That market skyrocketed during the pandemic lockdowns, and afterwards, we saw what happened. But during that period, modern comics also appreciated greatly during that period of time. But, a lot of those prices that we saw during the COVID era lockdowns, a lot of those prices did retrace afterwards, about 2022, 2023, kind of when that era ended, kind of when we went through the bear market or this retracement in collectibles. You did see some of those prices come down, but they kind of came down to where they were in 2018-19 leading up into that lockdown period. Let's take, for instance, Something is Killing the Children. Leading up into the COVID era lockdowns, 2018-19, that book was selling for $600, $700. Today's market still sells for $600 or $700 and CGC 9.8. You had a lot of those small press indie publishers, let's say Bitterroot, Monstrous #1, Ice Cream Man #1. All those books were trading for $150, $200 pre-lockdown. And once again, in today's market, they're trading for about $150, $200. So in the modern market, you just kind of lobbed off that 2-year period of data, and everything kind of seems to be moving along the same trajectory. Now, superhero books did not fare as well. It's kind of title specific, but they didn't fare as well as some of the small press and indie publishers. Take, for instance, Captain America 25. That's the first appearance of Sam Wilson as Captain America. And during the MCU Infinity Saga era, that book was doing well. I mean, I think that was trading at $300, $400, $500. During the COVID era lockdown, it kind of maintained that price. But in today's market, you're looking at maybe a $50 to $100 book. It did come down substantially, but that wasn't necessarily due to the skyrocketing price during the lockdown. That's kind of more due to the speculation and super hype of that Infinity era, that Infinity Saga era of movies. Everybody was buying superhero books. Everybody was into it. And after that Infinity Saga ended, you did see interest start waning. That has a lot to do with the fact that Disney Marvel was just putting out a ton of material and flooding the market, oversaturating the market, created kind of superhero fatigue. And the stories they were putting out after the Infinity Saga, it was doing more to harm the industry than it was to help it. I think they did just as much damage after the Infinity Saga as they did to help it during that period of time. During the Infinity Saga era, like I said, interest was incredibly high. Everybody wanted to be a part of it. Then afterwards, everybody's trying to kind of shun it and get away from it. So they did a lot of damage afterwards, in modern day. They can't seem to get it right. They can't seem to get that formula back. So the interest in modern comic book collecting has faded a little bit, but it's not going for good. Trust me, there's still a lot of opportunity. And that brings me back to the original purpose of this video. If I still think there's opportunity in the modern age comic book collecting, and I do, I think there's some great opportunity. I mean, just look at some of the books that just came out. Look, Absolute Batman #1, Ultimate Spider-Man #1. Those books just came out, within the past 3 or 4 months. Already trading for well over $100 in CGC 9.8. I think Ultimate Spider-Man is like $150 to $200. Ultimate Batman is like $100, $125. And these are books that just came out and have jumped up in price. And there's already well over 1,000 copies of the Absolute Batman #1 in CGC 9.8 graded. But people still want it. It doesn't matter if there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,000 copies. If 50,000 people want the book, the prices will still be pushed up. There'll still be demand for it, and people will still want it. And that's, I think, one thing that people don't understand when they're looking at population reports for some of these modern books. They see these big numbers, and they see 3, 4, 5,000 copies. If there's 100,000 people that want the book, that's not a lot. You do have to take that in consideration. Relativity matters in that. So how I feel about the current state of the graded comic book market, specifically modern or ultra-modern books. Like I said, I do think there's a lot of potential. I do think a lot of these books coming out, the ones that spike up in value, I do think they're going to hold a high value in going into the future. Maybe they might not trade at all-time highs, as they are today or at release. If they're trading for $150, they might drop down to $100. But you're talking about a book that you could buy off the shelf for $5, $6, graded for $20, $25. You're at $30, $40, and it's up to $100, $120, $150. You're talking about 300-400% gain. That's not bad. In today's market, that's still a great return for a modern comic that just comes out and hits the shelf. So in my opinion, the graded modern comic book market is doing well. It's going to be title specific for superhero titles. A lot of the small press indie publishers, a lot of those books, I think, in my opinion, have greater potential because if they actually get optioned and hit the screen, a lot of people don't collect those off the shelf. They are focused more on superheroes. So when those go big, they go really big. So those, in my opinion, do have great potential for future gains. So in my opinion, the graded comic book market, or the ultra-modern comic book market, still has a lot of room to run, still a lot of potential in that market. A lot of books coming out today that people want. A lot of books from the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years, still highly sought after. So I do think there's still great potential in this market. It's not dead. I know a lot of people are seeing the prices come down from the COVID era. But if you look back even further, that's kind of where the prices were trading leading up to that. So like I said, it seems like the market just lobbed off that few years of data, and they've kind of gone back to a normal trajectory. So there still is potential, so don't miss out just because you're focusing on the past 2 or 3 years. Look back a little further, you will see more of a stable trend line on those. So I hope this helps some of you guys. And as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time.